Do you want to go ahead and get us started on our last presentation of the day. I'll just give a quick introduction before I turn it over. Dr. Amrith Gunasekara is the Science Advisor to the Secretary at the California Department of Food and Agriculture. He's going to be speaking to us today about California's Healthy Soil Initiative. And perhaps, depending on who you are, most importantly, he is also an alumni of the Stockbridge School of Agriculture. And so he is certainly familiar with Massachusetts, even though he's coming to us from California today. And we are very excited to have a Stocky to talk to us today about soil health. So whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Thanks so much. Great to be here. Yes, I was at UMass for 9 years, so everything I learned to know about the work I'm doing is really a testament to UMass and working for Dr. Zing and plant and soil sciences. So really appreciate all the resources the campus has, and what a great campus, and very nice to be back. Again, my name's Ami, and happy to give you an overview of the California Healthy Soils Program. And if I'm running over, just give me a heads up on time. Thanks. So I manage what is the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. We started with 2 people in 2014, me and another lady, and we have now grown to 27 people. A lot of funding has come this way for incentive programs. So what we do in OFI, as we call it, the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation, short for OFI, we have incentive programs, we fund demonstration projects, and then we really do information sharing and a little bit of research, not as much as we'd like to. And really the mission I have written into the slide right here. We want to provide incentives in terms of management practices that have a net benefit for the environment. So this is a screenshot of our website. Here are some of the popular programs. We do have a dairy digester program and a state water efficiency and enhancement program. And these really capture different gases, but today I'm going to talk about this program, our Healthy Soils program. I'll give you a little bit of history on it, how it came to be, how it's funded, what we're really looking for, and sort of look at the success, if you might, of it today. But I've put a link into each of my slides at the bottom here, so if you need more information, you can always go there and check it out further. So the Healthy Soils program story at CDFA started really around 2015, and that was also the year of the UNFAO dedicated that year as the International Year of the Soils. And so here's a screenshot of the website from that time, and this is Claire Chenu, who was ambassador to that effort, who is well recognized in the soils world, who was leading this charge on recognizing the importance of our soil, especially for food security in light of climate change. So in 2015, we started talking about how we can align with this effort put forth by the UNFAO. And one thing we knew at that time was there were certain mandates by the governors that had been in California starting in 2006 by Governor Schwarzenegger, who set some goals, 80% reduction below 1990 levels by 2050. And then Governor Brown, who in 2015, who said that we should have a 40% reduction below 1990 level by 2030 as an interim standard to the Schwarzenegger goal. And then there have been some more recent executive orders that by Governor Newsom that have highlighted some important efforts on healthy soils and biodiversity. So that was happening previously and in 2015. And one thing we recognize is that agriculture is about 8% of the total greenhouse gas inventory in California. And this image, the pie chart's a little misleading because it's not all animals. About 4% of that 8% is from animals, but the rest is other sources from agriculture. And so one of the things we were thinking about is how can we use carbon sequestration to actually contribute to this, to not just the agriculture sector emission, but any sector, because a CO2 molecule is a CO2 molecule in the atmosphere. And so how can we use the photosynthetic process? How can we use the microbial degradation process? How can we use the carbon in the soil to build that up and highlight carbon sequestration? So in 2015, we also made roads into the policy arena to recognize carbon storage in the land base of 5 or 6 important strategies that the state's going to invest in. And so this was the first time there was a policy effort that we felt we could support going forward in the state. And basically, I won't spend a lot of time here, but the concept is there's a molecule of CO2 in the atmosphere, and there's a photosynthetic process that uses sunlight and water and carbon dioxide to create sugars. Then there's a microbial activity of those degradation products from the plants, and then there's soil carbon increases in the soil. And we also call that soil organic matter buildup. And so we feel that agriculture soils can really contribute to this effort and has some potential. There are certainly some scientific gaps missing, and I'll talk about those as we move along in this presentation. Okay, so as an overview, the Healthy Soils program then started from a discussion with other state agencies on how the healthy soils can benefit their own policy efforts. For example, the State Water Resources Control Board was really interested in healthy soils because they have sediment runoff issues into their waterways. And if you have healthy soils, you have greater soil structure, which means that you'll have less sediment erosion into the waterways. And of course, I'm generalizing the concepts here. There's a lot of details and scientific details that go into understanding that, but in general, conceptually, they've been interested in that. Another interesting agency was the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and they have pesticides moving into waterways, and so they were interested if you have a healthy soil, you have a greater organic carbon pool, you have a greater absorption capacity, you have less pesticides moving into the waterways because that soil now can hold on to those pesticides. So a lot of interest from other agencies, so we brought the agencies together. We highlighted some things we could do, and one of the things we identified is create a CDFA Healthy Soils program. And from that, in 2017 was born the Healthy Soils Incentive Program and the Healthy Soils Demonstration Projects Program. And the reason I said it was born is that's the first time we got money, in 2017. And as I mentioned, the objective is really to adopt conservation management practices that improve soil health, sequester carbon, and at the end of the day, reduce atmospheric greenhouse gases. We have 2 different types of demonstration projects. We have one that funds sort of a research platform, and then we also have one that funds a sort of outreach and education platform. So we did create the demonstration projects piece of the Healthy Soils program, and then of course an incentive program directly to farmers and ranchers. So in summary, let me just say to put this at sort of a 30,000-foot level, for our incentive programs, growers can pick one of 27 different practices and that they haven't implemented before, and they basically allows them to try a healthy soils practice that they might not have tried before. And basically it reduces their risk of trying a new practice. The goal here is if they do pick it, that they will see the benefits and continue to do it. We were the first in the nation to tie soil management practices with greenhouse gas emission values and reductions, and I'll explain more on how we do that. This was pretty critical for us because the money for this program in 2017 came from revenues from the cap and trade program that we have here in California. And so we had to develop some quantification methodology to figure out what those reductions might be. We believe this not only ties into climate change mitigation, but it also ties into adaptation. Soils was a big issue, and organic matter loss was a big issue during the Dust Bowl. And it really questioned our food security at that time. So this, we hope, will continue to have ag sustainability into the future while ensuring food security in light of a changing climate. The program does provide many ecosystem services and multiple other benefits. We haven't really quantified that, but we're trying to. For example, we have heard if you don't do no-till, if you do no-till and you don't till the soil, one thing you're going to benefit from is less tractor passes. And what that does is that saves on money for fuel, and that also saves on air quality. So there are multiple benefits that can be difficult to quantify, but we are trying to do that. Okay, so what are we talking as part of these 27 different practices? We're talking about compost addition to rangeland and cropland, and that's the image on the left, top left with the truck. We fund hedgerow planting, and this is not only benefits pollinators and habitat, but also the quantification here is above ground carbon sequestration in the woody material of those plants. And then, you know, our popular crop types here, we have orchards and vineyards being very interested in healthy soils. We also have grazing lands and cropland, and also mixed of those two. But our most popular are orchard and vineyards that do take it. Orchards are over 1 million acres right now of the 9.5 million irrigated acres in the state, and vineyards are also over 1 million acres of the 9.5 irrigated acres in the state. Our popular practices, our most popular practice is compost application. People like that one a lot. The next one's cover crops, followed by hedgerow planting. So those are the most popular practices that folks are interested in. This was of 319 projects that we had a solicitation for. So not our complete list, but this is the general distribution of how it comes out. I will say that compost addition ties into this effort to reduce food waste from the landfills as well. And that basically is the supply side of things. And we are trying to set up the demand side of things as ag being there to take that compost. So there's a double concerted effort to address methane from landfills and also carbon sequestration in soil that tie nicely into these policies. Okay, so just a summary to date, we've got 48 million to date, and we got another 160 million allocated for 21 through 23 fiscal year. We have a solicitation that's closing on Thursday for 75 million. We've funded 591 projects to date. We track the acres, we track the greenhouse gas reductions. The greenhouse gas reductions are an estimate. I'll explain how we get to that estimate again. We use a Comet Planner tool, which I will show you as well. We have an oversubscription rate about 160. That's a little bit difficult to calculate because we have a first come, first serve basis solicitation over 4 months. Sometimes we don't get a huge oversubscription rate, and sometimes we do, but the monies are all used up, and there's a lot of interest in the program. Here's an update of the most recent solicitation of 75 million. That closes on Thursday. We have again, this is as of February 16. This picture and image is posted on our website. It's changed. We have now received more than we have dollars to allocate, but we hope to fund around 1,000 projects all around the state with this 75 million, and then we have another 85 million next year to distribute as well. I should say these applications come in, they go through an administrative review to make sure that all the attachments and documents are there. And then we also go to the universities to get a technical review done. And then we decide whether to award the project or not based on that technical review. You have to make a minimum score to get past the admin and technical review and to be awarded a project. So we do rely on UC extension and find great value in the state continuing to invest in extension programs. One thing is the farm distribution sizes. We believe that we do find a nice distribution of farm sizes across the board. We don't have a definition for small farm. The USDA does, but it depends on if you collect financial information or not. We do not collect financial information because we are subject to the Public Request Act, and that's a sensitive topic with growers. We don't want to disincentivize them from applying to our program. So we do track the acreage size, and there's a nice distribution across farm sizes here. One thing I will say is we really provide a lot of outreach. We try to do how-to videos that have got a lot of views, and we also fund technical assistance. One of the hard things here is that a grower has to quantify their greenhouse gases, and I'll show you how that's done. But we know that growers and farmers and ranchers are not sitting around a table after a hard day's work talking about greenhouse gases. And when we started this discussion of greenhouse gases in 2010, 11, you know, it was a new topic, and folks weren't really familiar on what we were talking about in the ag sector. But now, 10 years later, partly because of our programs, folks are very familiar with it. They know what it means. They know how they can contribute to the climate change issue. And it's a really nice place to be in terms of a proactive measure that the ag community is making towards climate change and environmental sustainability. I'll talk more about the technical assistance providers in a couple of slides. This is a very text-heavy slide, and I apologize for that. But one of the things I will say is when we did this program, we found it important to fund demonstration projects. And demonstration projects has two types. You have a type A and a type B. And the type A is really about collecting research for gaps that we have, for practices that we then want to include in the incentive program coming up. So every 2 years, we have a solicitation for new practices that folks may want to include as conservation management practices in the incentive program. And we also use the research avenue to try to get those data gaps filled so we can bring the additional practices in. The type B is more on organizations and farmers demonstrating a practice on their farm, and then having other farmers come and learn about that practice, and then voluntarily go out back to their own farms and implement them based on the feedback and thoughts they had found at the demonstration project. So we have as you can see from the last line here, we have 120 farmer requirement over the project term of 3 years that they have to meet, and they have to voluntarily distribute this information so that folks can voluntarily put this on their own farms. When we were not sure how long the money is going to last, and so we felt that this was an important approach to continuing the the conservation management practices to build carbon on a voluntary basis in the state. Okay, I'm going to talk about this cool tool we created. It's called a Comet Planner. We didn't create it, USDA NRCS did. And actually what it was is we have our own special link here in the Comet Planner tool. So you could go to the front end of Comet Planner, and this is what you'll see. And you can use it by selecting your state, etc. And it's open to all states. But we had a special carve out here circled in red for the California Healthy Soils program. And I'll tell you why it's different and the importance of having that for our grower community. So we wanted to adapt Comet Planner to really make it the quantification tool and also let farmers know how much they're going to get paid, because those are the two important things that we need to report on, and that's how much you get paid is what the growers are really interested in. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to a separate link, and the one thing you will see between this page and the next page is when it says select your agricultural system in step 2. In the main page, there's 5 different choices. On our page, there is 3 different choices. And what you choose governs then what practices are that the grower is eligible for. Because not all practices will be applicable to all 3 systems. And so continuing down in that tool, basically in step 3, once you pick your system, you then pick the practice, and then you select further on what type of practice and what specific practice you want to implement. And so one of the things you will see here in the first column on the step 3 is something called a CPS, or a conservation practice standard. We didn't want to complicate and create a new program for growers, that a new distinction of practices that they would just be complicated with. So what we did is we created and we took the existing USDA and RCS conservation practice standards and we adapted them for California. So basically, if you do that, you have to follow that recipe that's already developed by USDA and RCS. The importance of doing this is you don't recreate the wheel and confuse the farming community and the agricultural community. And then also you have consistency between USDA and RCS, and growers are familiar with USDA and RCS because they have this long-standing environmental quality incentive program or EQIP program that is very popular amongst the grower community. So we wanted to align, and we work closely with USDA and RCS on making sure we align with what they already have and that the growers are familiar with. One thing I will say is they didn't have a standard for compost application. They do have now an interim standard. And so we had to create our own standard in CDFA, which is why next to compost application there in the first column, you say CDFA in brackets instead of a CPS number. But after that, in step 4, after you choose your practice, you tell the system, the tool, how many acres you want to implement, and then it spits out for you a carbon dioxide estimation value, nitrous oxide, methane, and a total CO2 equivalent number. So this is the quantification methodology that we need to support this program. And then it also gives you a payment rate. These payment rates are already established with USDA and RCS, and we just built it in here so the growers can see it all in one place, super easy. I will say one thing is that, again, all these practices are estimated CO2 reductions. They're conservative estimates that the USDA came out with a big book several years ago on the quantification of greenhouse gases from ag systems, and so that's what it's based on. We also, if you scroll down further, you have the Comet Planner report and the theoretical assumptions behind them. We also have a CDFA white papers that we have done to support the programs as well. One of the newer practices is whole orchard recycling that we added last year, and then it shows you how the math and the equations are on the estimations that are made. So we also had a second tool that we developed. This is called the replan tool. This had to do with actually mapping your fields, and we have a specific carve out on that tool for the Healthy Soils program as well. We require the field and the assessor parcel number because you can't, we want to make sure that you don't keep using it and double counting your greenhouse gases by continuing to do the practice on the same field with getting money from us. So basically we were getting written or drawn images of the field and the APN. So we wanted to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And in this tool, basically you choose your practice, the same practice you're going to put into Common Planner. And then you draw out your field. Here's an example. We have the yellow box is my field, and it'll automatically pull up your assessor parcel number in the tool. And then you can save it as a PDF and attach it to the application. Or if you put in your application number, it directly now connects with your application in the Healthy Soils portal. So really user-friendly system. But they have to leave the application platform twice to go to the Comma Planner tool and to go to the Replan tool. This can be difficult for farmers and ranchers. So what we have funded is we have funded about $11 million in technical assistance for all our programs, not just the Healthy Soils program. But these folks have to they get money to offer free help to farmers and ranchers to put in the applications when the application portal is open. And this has been rather critical because there is a lift in terms of filling out that application and doing the quantification methodology, the Comma Planner, and also completing the Replan tool. So it's an important piece of our Healthy Soils program. We also fund about 10 University of California community education specialists in UC Cooperative Extension that their sole job is to help folks with applications and then also help the growers with providing the reporting data back to CDFA. We do have some follow-up reporting data, including soil sample data over the next 3 years after you implement the practice. So they can also help with that. But these folks are distributed throughout the state to offer technical assistance to any grower or rancher who wants to apply for our Healthy Soils program. All this work ties very closely into natural and working lands effort that's going on now. This is an initiative by Governor Newsom to recognize natural working lands and how we can capitalize further on them. And there was a draft that was put out recently on this effort. And the Healthy Soils program is memorialized further. But really what it does, it also memorializes the importance of carbon sequestration, not only in below ground carbon, but also in above ground carbon, in trees, in forests, etc. I should say that effort is not led by CDFA. That effort is led by the California Natural Resources Agency. CDFA is a separate agency that works in the agriculture sector, but we have certainly contributed to the content in terms of the ag sector in this document. We believe that carbon sequestration is really important in this state. Because of our ag sector, when I first moved here, I had no idea that California led the nation in crop production. We have a lot of specialty crops here, a lot of the fruits and veggies that go into your fruit salads and your salads in general. I always like to point to the fact that when the rest of the country is under winter, we are growing lettuce in the southern desert of California near the Mexican border and shipping that all over the country. So in 3 to 4 days because of the shelf life of lettuce. So pretty amazing logistics, infrastructure. ability to move water from the north of the state, where we get a lot of snowpack, to the south. So there are over 400 plus commodities in this state. It's really driven by innovation and technology, 70,000 farms, and our main crops are cropland, orchard, vineyards, and rangeland. So very important crops in terms of nutrition, to highlight and ensure that we had this sort of food security into the future. I'm getting close to ending, and I'll just say that all this is based on some historic documentation, that a policy documentation that was drafted starting in 2010, and that document was called Ag Vision. And if you look at the strategies, there's one strategy that talks, or two strategies that just actually mention climate change and environmental sustainability. The first one is strategy 9 of 12 that talks about assuring agricultural adaptation to climate change. So we feel what we're doing in the Healthy Soils program directly feeds into that. And if you look at the past history beyond that, there is not much in terms of climate change. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this discussion started around 2010, 2011, and it's really evolved in a very positive way amongst the ag community. And then strategy 7 of 12 talks about expanding environmental stewardship on farms and ranches. And we feel like we're doing that. As I mentioned, the other state agencies are very interested in healthy soils because of the policy benefits it offers in terms of assuring the environmental compliance for those agencies. Following 2010's Ag Vision report, there was also an effort when I first started in 2012 where we led what we call the CDFA Climate Change Consortium for Specialty Crops. And we brought growers, extension specialists, researchers at the university and academic institutions together with farmers and ranchers to talk about climate change. And it was a small group, but it was a very diverse group, including some ag organizations and associations, to talk about climate change and build a roadmap on what we can work for. And we asked two questions at that meeting. We asked, what are you doing now in terms of climate change mitigation adaptation? And the second question we asked is, how can we help? Well, the first question didn't lead to any answers. No one was really thinking about it and doing anything on it other than what they have been doing for plant health over the years. But they gave us a very long list of things to work on. And so that you can read the whole report at the bottom here. I've included the link. But what you'll find in there is there were mentions of healthy soils, there was mentions of water efficiency and savings, all of which we used to build our programs off of. So these documents, these policy documents were sort of key for ensuring a science-based programs that we could create today under the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. So I'm going to end there. I'm happy to take any questions. I just want to recognize the real people behind the program who do all this hard work on a daily basis. Processing 1,000 and managing 1,000 grants over 3 years is a Herculean effort, and it takes a lot of dedicated scientists. Many of who you see have PhDs and master's degrees, and and you know, another thing we really pride ourselves on is this triple helix that's also used all over the world in working with farmers, government, academia, and nonprofits, including the extension offices. We see this partnership as key in sort of building out these programs more. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We do have a few questions, and people that are on the call, please, or on the webinar, please do keep them coming. We have a lot of questions about how California makes this program work. I think the first big question, and we share this in Massachusetts, is a diversity in landscape and a diversity in crops. And so how did California manage coming up with recommendations and meeting the needs of this really diverse landscape and growers?
That's a fantastic question, and really the foundation on how we have set up this program. And we've talked to about 5 other states and 4 other countries about a healthy soils program. This is one of the things I highlight. So I'm glad the question was asked. So when you build a program, a healthy soils program, you can approach it 2 ways. You can approach it by crop type, or you can approach it by management practice type. If you approach it by crop type, you better not have a lot of crops in your state, because you're going to set up some crops that are going to be able to sequester carbon while other crops won't be. And I can tell you, you will hear from those farmers who are left out of being eligible. And with our 200 plus crops, all the way from strawberries to bok choy to lettuce to our tree crops, almonds and walnuts, there's no way we could have made all those crops eligible. So how do you make the crops, all the crops feed into the system? Well, another way to do it is you recognize the practices, okay? And you create a menu of practices that if you're a grower, you can say, okay, I'm growing this crop. Which of these 27 practices will work for my system and for my business model? And because at the end of the day, farmers and ranchers do have to make a living, their families, and you want to make it part of their business model, especially so that they can continue to see the benefits and carry that practice on there. So we built the program from the management practice standpoint, by offering a menu that any grower can go in and say, okay, well, I have done this, I haven't done this, I want to try this. And we feel that there are more than one practice that will work for all these different crops. So we have offered growers a whole plethora of different options. And you see that when you see folks applying, you see that in the diversity of crop types that we cover, as I showed you in that pie chart. So great question. So our program is built on management practice type.
Great. I think that'll be applicable for us in Massachusetts too, for sure. Another question is, have you collected data that has shown that you have increased soil carbon, and do you think that would have happened in an absence of this program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So soil carbon is collected through USDA and RCS that feeds into the CIRCO database that the Web Soil Survey website's based on. So you can go to any spot in any country and it'll give you, you draw a little box and the data, the USDA database will spit out for you the organic matter content and the physiochemical distribution of the soil in that very spot. Now, that's not all real samples. There is a sampling that takes place. So there is that database that exists. For our program, we ask folks that if you're doing the practice and you get an award, you have to do the practice for 3 years. So if you're doing compost or anything below ground in terms of carbon sequestration, you got to do that practice for 3 years. And 3 years was really important because all the scientific literature points to the fact that anything you do for less than 3 years doesn't yield soil carbon results greater than the standard deviation of sampling. So if you do it at least for 3 years, there's a high certainty that now you have a value that's greater than the sampling error that you would take in that field. So you have to do the practice for 3 years, but really, you want folks doing this practice for, more than that time, up to 10 or 20 years if possible, right? The longer you do it, the better. What we said is when you do the 3 years, at the end of each of the 3 years, you have to do a soil sample and you have to send us the results. Now, that gets a little tricky, and we are analyzing our first project was funded in 2017 and ended in 2021. So we're just analyzing that data now and trying to see how best to make it available for the general public. One of the things is that data is a little bit tricky, because if you add compost and you had a 2% organic matter in your soil, and you add compost and you sample right after that, guess what? Your sample is going to come out at about 9, 10, 11% organic matter. That's because you sampled the compost and not the real, you didn't give it time to adapt in the soil and have microbial degradation and the process to go through, right? So there are these issues that are coming up that we have to look at and deal with and see what is real data and what are sort of anomalies in the data. So it gets a little complicated on that front, but that's certainly something that needs to be sorted out further. We are watching closely the development of sensors, soil sensors, to do real-time organic matter analysis, which would give us a much better picture. It always amazes me. We have all these tools to measure our blood oxygen and our pulse rate and all these health things, but we don't have tools to measure the organic carbon of soil real time. And you have to take a sample and send it to the lab. And this is the primary medium for food security, for our food. And yet we seem to be behind the curve in these technologies. But there are companies working to develop these real-time sensors that I think would offer us some benefits in the future.
Yeah, the testing is another one of those hot topics. And I think Freya alluded to that too. We've been thinking this morning about earthworms. How do we measure these things and make sense of those measurements? So another question is, so now that you have this program in place, what does the state find as the remaining greatest barrier to adoption for farmers? So those late adopters that still haven't adopted these improved soil health management practices, what's holding them back?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer to that. One of the things we feel that's important from a policy perspective in tying the science and the policy together is, look, we're not going to fund every single farmer in this state with the dollars we have. We just don't have enough dollars. But I think, what we can share is how much the conversation in the ag community has shifted from literally not knowing how carbon sequestration can tie into the climate change mitigation picture to how now that, oh wow, we see this as a benefit. And you see that now from all policy standpoints. USDA just came out with a huge $1 billion announcement for different programs to be established in different states. You see rhetoric about our conversation about funding farmers to do conservation practices at the federal level. You see states trying to build out programs because they see the value in this conversation expanding and using ag as a sector that can contribute to the greenhouse gas mitigation piece. And I think, if that happens, then you are obviously engaging your agriculture community and getting farmers interested in this topic. And from the increased funding we have got, I mean, we got 10 million the first year, and now we got 75 million, and we always wonder, are we going to have enough applications? And the very fact that we have enough applications and we use all the money just shows you how much interest there is amongst the ag community. And I don't think it's, it's not free money, right? Because you have to do something. It's growers wanting to do something, and you cannot have done the practice in the past. So our rules say that, this is really, if you haven't done the practice in the past and you want to do it and you want to try it out, we'll fund you. Okay, so it's these farmers who really want to try something on their farm and have maybe talk to another farmer about the benefits or learned about it through the extension services that are engaging in this space. And it's that piece, it's changing the conversation so that hopefully this conversation piece will continue to live on its own into the future.
And our next question is, would the COMET tool be appropriate for other people in other states to use, or is that specific to California? So I think, for example, if a person wanted to get an estimate of how their new practice might affect, their greenhouse gas emissions or sequestration.
Yeah, so if you're using it simply for greenhouse gases, it'll certainly work. What we did in the California piece is we worked with the USDA and RCS to also tie the county soil information back into the quantification. So there's like one added level of quantification that we did in that carve out of the California tool. Okay, so that's so if you go to your county in another state, it won't sort of bring that county soils information into play. But we did that for California, and the main difference is the cost. The cost estimates there in the California tool that's not there if you use it for any other state. You could choose to go to the California tool under Common Farmer, not the Healthy Soils tool, but the Simply State tool, and it'll act just like any other state. So they haven't removed that option either. We just have an added level of detail in the California Healthy Soils tool in there. I should also say, if people want a greater level of quantification, they should also consider looking at Comet Farm. In 2014 and 15, Comet Farm is sort of a more comprehensive greenhouse gas accounting tool. Like, you have to put in 10 years of history that you use on the farm. You need a lot more data points in there. And it'll give you not only your greenhouse gas reductions, but it'll give you sort of a host of strategies that you could contribute to your farm in terms of greenhouse gas reduction. So it's a lot more involved. But I will say in 2014 and 15, we invested probably $400,000 in that tool in putting in specialty crops. Because that tool really didn't have specialty crops. It was really the main crops, the soy, the wheat, the soybean in there. And so we invested some additional dollars in getting the scientific data to support additional specialty crops in there. So there's not a whole lot of specialty crops, but I think there's about 12 specialty crops. But those are the major crops in California that account for probably 70% of our irrigated acres. So it's another tool that's out there. Check it out. It's Comet Farm instead of Comet Planner.
Great. Okay, I will put that on a follow-up. That sounds really interesting. So if anybody's interested in that, we can put that in our follow-up email as well. I have two last questions as of right now. So if anybody else has a question, please go ahead and get them in. The one question here is, and I don't know how much you can answer this, but how does the state fund those technical service providers? I think what they're getting after is that grant funded? Is it a part of tax revenue? How do you make that work?
So what is let me see if I understand the question. What is the funding source? Is that the question?
Yes, so I think, yeah, is like, are those technical service provider positions or your support of UC Davis, is that coming from grants, or is that built into the state's budget, maybe through tax revenue?
Yeah. Right, so we get funding for the program from either the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund or the General Fund. The latest dollars have come from General Fund, which is huge. Like, if you're allocating General Fund, that means it's really high priority for the state. Once we get those dollars, we have to give no less than 5% or no more than 5 million. We could give more if we wanted to technical assistant providers. And this is in statute. So when the allocations are made, this is started in statute, because technical assistants are a very critical part of making sure these programs work. And so that 5% we put out as a general RFP, a request for proposals, from the universities, nonprofit organizations, and resource conservation districts. And CDFA doesn't have boots on the ground for climate smart ag practices in our incentive program, so we really rely on university cooperative extension, we rely on the resource conservation districts, and we rely heavily on also nonprofit organizations for providing this expertise to bring growers into our programs. But every dollar, every allocation we get has a carve out for technical assistance.
Great. And okay, the last question that I think we might have for the day is, and this is a good one to end on, for a state early in the process of developing their own soil health initiative, what would you recommend we consider when we're beginning the process? And in hindsight, is there anything that you would now like to do differently or change about the program in California?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Well, first of all, let me just say I'm the science advisor, I'm not the policy advisor. And when you create these programs, certainly the latter comes into play a lot. One thing I'd say for anyone wanting to create a new program is to engage your ag community, to have enough time to really engage the agriculture community and say, hey, we're thinking of building this program, what will work for you, and have a sort of general framework that the grower community can comment on. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to build a program that doesn't work for the growers and just sits there with money in it, and you don't want a failure, right? You want a success, and the success is only measured by how subscribed the program is. Does the money fully get allocated, right? And just because you offer growers money doesn't mean they're going to come marching and take it, because they still have to do the practice, and you want to figure out if whatever you're offering fits into their business model. Does it make economic sense? Does it reduce the risk for them to try something new? So that's a big piece. I think we did that a little bit. I wish we had done that more. For the Healthy Soils program, we were kind of moving on a really fast timeline. But I know some of the other states who have talked to us are taking this approach and seeing the benefits from it. And not only the grower community, you certainly hear from your ag associations and organizations as well, because they represent the grower community. So that's one thing I would say that's really important to do when you're building a new program, the stakeholder engagement piece. One thing I would do differently, I will tell you we're doing this now. I will tell you that we are continuously trying to simplify this application process. If you go to a grower and say, hey, you can apply to this program, but you have to fill out a quantification methodology, the first thing they're going to ask you is, what on earth's a quantification methodology and why do I have to fill it out? They don't really, it doesn't really impact them. What it really impacts is our reporting on the greenhouse gases to the funding agency, to the legislature, to the governor. That's where it really impacts us. So it's our piece of the puzzle that we're asking growers to fill out. So the question is, how can you simplify that? Can you do that internally in your programs to take off the burden from the growers? And how can you simplify an application? So when we first started the program, there were so many moving parts. This program, by the way, amongst all our incentive programs, has the most moving parts, because you can pick this practice, but you can't mix it with this practice. You can do this, you can't do that. There's so many different moving parts in here. So we are continuously trying to simplify the application process for the growers. And the very simple fact that you have to leave, so when you're filling out the application, which is an electronic application, you have to leave that application to go to another tool to fill out Common Plan. And you have to leave that application to go to the replan tool to finish out. And then you need to download those reports and attach them back to the application. So that very fact that you're making them leave the application brings issues into play. I mean, very simple issues that you and I are familiar with. For example, you click on this and it opens up another browser. Okay, well, when you download it, hey, where did that other browser go? Just simple things like that, navigating that piece of it can be challenging to people. So especially our socially disadvantaged farmers. We have Hmong farmers here that have a hard time with the application process, but that's why we have technical assistance to help them. So the goal is to simplify it because it has a lot of moving pieces, and that's the challenge.
Great, thank you. And I think that's really good insight, especially on the front end of things when you can maybe prevent the complexity rather than have to go back later and try to make it more simple. So I believe that's all the questions that we have at this point. And so we will, I know that you are very busy and we appreciate you making time to be here with us today. So we'll let you get to the rest of your day. Thank you again. And if there's anybody on that comes up with a question later on, please get in touch with me and we'll make sure we get it answered.
Well, thanks for having me, and have a great rest of the evening, everyone over there on the East Coast. Take care.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So for those of you still on, I am going to go ahead and close down the webinar. You will get a last post-assessment survey. It's going to automatically open up when you leave. You'll get follow-up emails with the information for how to access the recordings. And of course, anything that comes up that didn't get answered today, please send me an email and we'll get you to the right person. Thank you for being here with us. Bye, everybody.